I didn't say a word when I opened the door. I just looked at them. My mother was wearing her good coat, the camel wool one she saves for occasions she wants people to notice her. My father stood half a step behind her, the way he always does when he needs her to do the talking. They looked older. Of course they did. It had been 22 years. "Hazel," my mother said, "we need to talk to you." I leaned against the doorframe and waited. I was 16 when I first understood that my parents saw me as something they owned, not a daughter, an asset, something that reflected well on them at church, at the country club. At the neighborhood association dinners my mother hosted twice a year with her color-coded tablecloths and her store-bought appetizers arranged to look homemade. I was a good student. I got good grades. I stayed quiet. I dressed the way she wanted. I smiled at the right people. I was performing a version of myself that had been cast before I was old enough to audition. Then, when I was 18, I fell in love with a boy named Jonah. Jonah was not the kind of boy my parents had in mind. He wasn't from money. His father drove trucks for a regional shipping company, and his mother worked the front desk at a dental office in Roanoke. They were good people, honest people, the kind of people my father called fine, just fine, in a tone that meant the opposite. I didn't tell my parents about Jonah for almost 8 months. I met him through a mutual friend, and we spent most of that time in the kind of quiet that only teenagers in love can manage. Parking lots at dusk, long drives on back roads, talking about everything and nothing. He made me feel like myself for the first time, not the performance, me. When I finally told my mother, she set down her coffee cup with the careful precision of someone trying not to throw it. "Where does his family live?" she asked. "Off Route 11, near the old fairgrounds." She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. 2 weeks later, my father sat me down in his study, the room with the leather chairs he never actually sat in and the bookshelves lined with books he'd never read, and explained that I needed to think about my future. He used phrases like social capital and the kind of family you come from and what people will say. He never once asked me how I felt. I told him I loved Jonah. He laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh exactly. It was the laugh of someone who finds a child's idea of the world charming and irrelevant. I kept seeing Jonah. I got less quiet about it. My mother started finding reasons to pull me out of school events, rearrange my weekends, fill my schedule with things that left no room for him. I pushed back. For the first time in my life, I actually pushed back. They did not take it well. The specific argument that ended everything happened on a Tuesday in October, 6 weeks into my senior year of high school. I had told them I was going to a study session at the library. I was actually at Jonah's house, eating pizza with his parents, and watching a movie, doing nothing that anyone with a reasonable mind would object to. My mother tracked my phone. I hadn't known she could do that. I hadn't known she could do that. I hadn't known she was doing it. When I got home, both of them were waiting in the kitchen. My father had printed out a map showing where I'd been. He actually printed it out and put it on the table like evidence in a trial. What followed was the worst 2 hours of my life up to that point. They called Jonah's family trashy. They called me ungrateful, dishonest, embarrassing. My mother said that the way I was behaving reflected on all of them, that I was going to ruin everything they'd built. My father said that if I couldn't respect the rules of their house, I didn't deserve to live in it. I told them they could keep the house. I packed a bag that night, not a dramatic, movie-style bag, just a duffel I found in my closet, stuffed with clothes and my laptop and the money I had saved from babysitting, about $340. I walked out at 11:30 p.m. while they were still arguing in the kitchen. I don't think they expected me to actually go. I don't think I expected it either until I was already outside in the cold and my feet kept moving. I walked to the gas station 2 blocks away and called Jonah. He came in 15 minutes, no questions asked, and drove me to his parents' house. His mother made up the couch with sheets that smelled like dryer sheets. She didn't ask me anything except whether I was hungry. I cried in the bathroom for about 20 minutes, then came out and ate a bowl of cereal at the kitchen table at midnight. It was the kindest I'd been treated all day. I stayed with Jonah's family for 3 weeks. His parents were extraordinary. They fed me, gave me a real room when his sister went back to college, and never once made me feel like a burden. His father said, "You can stay as long as you need," and he meant it, not as a polite thing to say, but as a fact. My own parents sent one text in those 3 weeks. It said, "When you're ready to come back and act like part of this family, the door is open, but on our terms." I did not respond. Here is something they don't tell you about being 18 and broke and suddenly responsible for yourself. The logistics are relentless. They crowd out everything else. There's no time to grieve the parents you wanted because you're too busy figuring out how to eat. I finished high school from Jonah's house. I had already been accepted to a state school in Virginia on a partial academic scholarship, which my parents had co-signed the FAFSA the previous spring. When I turned 18 and refiled as an independent student, my aid package actually improved. That was the first time I understood that the system, in certain narrow circumstances, could work in your favor if you knew how to read it. Jonah and I stayed together through the first 2 years of college. He was at a community college 40 minutes away, working toward a transfer. We were good together for a long time. Then we grew in different directions, the way people do when they're young and still figuring out who they are. The breakup was quiet and mutual and sad, the way the best breakups are. We stayed friends. We still are. I majored in accounting. It was not a romantic choice. I chose it because I was good with numbers, because it was practical, and because I had grown up watching my parents perform wealth while secretly carrying debt they hid from each other and from me. Numbers, I had learned early, were where the truth lived. People lied. Spreadsheets didn't. I graduated with honors. I had a job at a regional CPA firm in Charlotte before I even walked across the stage. I made $41,000 my first year and thought I was rich. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates, drove a 2004 Civic I bought for $3,200 cash, and put 12% of every paycheck into my 401k. Because my accounting professor had spent half a semester explaining compound interest to us, like it was a religious experience. I listened. I did not contact my parents. They did not contact me. There was a period, somewhere in my mid-20s, when I thought about reaching out, not because I missed them exactly, but because there's a particular kind of hollow feeling you carry around when your family is a closed door, and sometimes you wonder if knocking again would make it feel less heavy. I drafted a few texts. I never sent them. What I had instead was better. Jonah's mother, Diane, who had made me cereal at midnight and never asked anything in return, became one of the most important people in my life. She came to my college graduation. She sent me a card every birthday. When I moved to Charlotte, she mailed me a cast iron skillet and a card that said, "Every good kitchen starts with one of these." I still have it. I also had my own family, assembled slowly over years. Friends from work who became dinner table regulars. A neighbor named Pat who was 73 and fixed my leaky faucet and taught me to make biscuits. A college roommate who flew in from Portland every year for my birthday whether or not I told her to. These people showed up. That matters more than blood. I know that now the way I know my own name. When I was 28, I was offered a senior analyst position at a healthcare consulting firm in Atlanta. The salary was $94,000. I said yes before I hung up the phone. Atlanta was a turning point in ways I didn't fully understand until later. The work was harder and more interesting than anything I'd done before. I was analyzing contracts, identifying billing irregularities, advising hospitals on compliance issues that could save them or sink them depending on how they were handled. I was good at it. More importantly, I loved it. I also met my husband there. His name is Ryan. He was the contractor the firm brought in to rebuild their data infrastructure. A quiet man with very good handwriting who brought homemade sandwiches to the office and always held the elevator. We had our first real conversation at a work happy hour where neither of us wanted to be. He spent 20 minutes explaining to me why Chicago-style deep dish isn't actually pizza, and I spent 20 minutes telling him he was wrong, and by the end of the night we were both laughing and I had his number in my phone. We dated for 2.5 years. He met Diane before he met any of my other people, which tells you something about how I think about family. She approved of him immediately and told him so directly, which made him look slightly stunned and very pleased. We got married in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Atlanta. 40 people, fairy lights, a bluegrass band, good food, no drama. It was the best day of my life. Ryan knew about my parents. He knew everything. One night early in our relationship, I told him the whole story, start to finish, sitting on the floor of his apartment eating Thai food out of the containers. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. Not I'm sure they meant well, or maybe you could patch things up someday. Just I'm sorry." That was the right thing to say. He has always known the right thing to say. By 32, I had been promoted to director. Our household income was in the range that felt genuinely stable, not flashy, but solid. We had a house in a good neighborhood in Decatur. We had a rescue dog named Toast. We had a retirement account that made me feel like my accounting professor's ghost was somewhere nodding with satisfaction. I was, for the first time in my life, simply and completely fine. Not performing fine. Actually fine. I did not think about my parents much anymore. That sounds cruel, maybe. But grief for parents you've lost to estrangement works differently than ordinary grief. It doesn't have a moment of rupture to organize itself around. It spreads out over years, fades in and out, settles eventually into something that aches only occasionally and distantly, like an old injury in cold weather. By the time I was 32, I had done enough therapy and enough living to understand that what I had lost was not actually the parents I had won. Those parents had never existed. There was nothing to mourn. Then one Saturday morning in March, I was in the kitchen making coffee when the intercom buzzed. Ryan was out running. I wasn't expecting anyone. I pressed the button. "Who is it?" "Hazel," my mother's voice. 22 years, and I still knew it immediately, the way you know a particular weather pattern before it arrives. "It's your mother. Please let us up." I stood very still for a moment. Then I pressed the button again and said, "I'll come down." I want to describe the way I felt walking down those stairs, because I've thought about it many times since. It wasn't panic. It wasn't the old sick dread I used to feel as a teenager hearing her car in the driveway. It was something closer to the feeling you get when you hear a noise in the middle of the night and then realize it was just the house settling. A spike of alert attention followed almost immediately by a kind of calm. I had lived through the worst of what these people could do to me. I had built everything since then without them. Whatever this was, I had already survived harder things. I opened the front door. My mother was wearing her good coat. My father was half a step behind her. They looked older, softer, deflated in some specific way that I couldn't quite name, like balloons 2 days after the party. "Hazel," my mother said, "you look well." "Thank you," I said. I did not tell her she looked well. I waited. My father cleared his throat. "We were hoping we could talk." "About what?" They exchanged the glance. My mother did the thing she always did when she was approaching something uncomfortable. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin slightly, like she was bracing for a current. "About the future," she said. "About reconnecting. As a family." I kept my face neutral. "Why now?" Another glance between them. "We're not," my father started. He stopped. He tried again. "We've had some changes in our circumstances." I had expected something like this. Not the specific contours, but the shape of it. People who walk back into your life after 22 years of silence do not typically do so because they've spent that time growing as individuals. They come back because something has shifted in their circumstances. Usually they need something. "What kind of changes?" I asked. My mother looked uncomfortable. "Your grandfather's estate has entered a probate dispute. There's a trust. The original structure required a family declaration from all living descendants. Your father needs you to sign a document acknowledging the family relationship." I looked at my father. He looked at the ground, then back up at me. It would help us significantly. I thought about that for a moment. A trust. A legal document. A signature that would formalize on paper a family relationship that had been abandoned on a Tuesday night in October 22 years ago. "What does the trust involve?" I asked. My father named a number. It was significant. I nodded slowly, as if I were considering this. I wasn't. I had known from the moment I saw them through the intercom glass what I was going to say, but I let them stand there for another moment, because I am human and I am not entirely above that. Then I said, I need to ask you something first. Of course, my mother said with the careful warmth of someone who has decided that warmth is the correct strategic position. When I left, I said, I was 18. I had $340 and a duffel bag. I finished high school from a borrowed couch. I put myself through college. I have spent the last 14 years building a life entirely without your help. You didn't call. You didn't write. You didn't come to my graduation or my wedding or I stopped. I took a breath. You didn't come for any of it. My mother opened her mouth. I'm not asking you to explain, I said. I'm just establishing facts. She closed her mouth. The answer is no, I said. I won't sign anything. I don't have a family relationship with you that exists on paper or anywhere else. Whatever dispute is happening with the estate, you'll need to resolve it without me. My father's expression shifted. The softness went out of it. For a moment, I could see exactly the man who had sat across a desk from me when I was 18 and laughed at the idea that my feelings were relevant. You realize, he said, that you would benefit too. There is a portion allocated. I don't want it, I said. Hazel, be reasonable, my mother said. The warmth in her voice had cured into something harder. This is a significant amount of money. For everyone. We are still your parents. Whatever happened between us, that doesn't just disappear, I said. No, it doesn't disappear. You're right about that. I looked at them both for a moment, my father with his jaw set, my mother with her good coat and her careful expression, performing the role of wrong parent with the same precision she used to perform, gracious host and devoted churchgoer and concerned neighbor, always performing. Even now, I have a good life, I said. I have a husband who is a genuinely good person. I have a home. I have people who showed up for me when you didn't. I have a retirement account and a dog and a cast iron skillet that someone who actually loved me sent me when I was 23 and alone in a new city. I paused. I don't need anything from you. I never have, as it turns out. My mother's eyes had gone bright in a way I couldn't entirely read. Anger, maybe? Or something older than anger? So this is how you want to leave it, she said. This is how it's already been, I said. I'm just saying it out loud. I held the door. After a moment, my father turned and walked back toward the car. My mother lingered for another second or two, long enough for me to wonder if she was going to say something real, something that wasn't about the estate or the document or the strategic reconnection, something human. I waited. I had always been willing to wait for something human from her. She straightened her coat. I hope you'll reconsider, she said. I won't, I said. I watched them drive away. The morning was cool and bright and extremely ordinary. A neighbor walking her dog, a kid on a scooter, the sound of someone mowing a lawn 2 streets over. Brian came back from his run about 10 minutes later, flushed and out of breath, and found me sitting on the front steps with a cup of coffee I'd gone back inside to make. You okay? He said, reading my face the way he always does. Yeah, I said, and meant it. He sat down next to me without asking anything else. We sat there for a while drinking coffee on the front steps in the March sun, toast at our feet, the neighborhood going about it Saturday. There's a particular kind of peace that comes not from things being easy, but from knowing exactly where you stand, from having built, stone by stone, a life that belongs entirely to you, and knowing that no one can walk back into it and rearrange it because it is solid and yours and made of years of real work. My parents raised me to believe that family was a name, a reputation, a set of rules designed to protect an image. They were wrong. Family is the person who makes up the couch without being asked. It's the colleague who calls when you've had a bad week. It's the man who sits down beside you on the steps and doesn't need to know everything to know that you're all right. I finished my coffee. I let them go the same way you let go of something you've been carrying a long time. Not all at once, not without feeling it, but with the quiet knowledge that your hands are finally free. I used to think the hardest part of what happened to me was the night I left. The duffel bag, the cold air, the gas station payphone glow. But looking back now, I don't think that was the hardest part at all. The hardest part was the years after, the quiet ones, when nothing dramatic was happening and I still had to choose every single day to keep going anyway. There's a version of my story where I became someone better, where the anger at what my parents did followed me into every room I entered, every relationship I tried to build. I understand that version. I was close to it for a while, but somewhere around my mid-20s, sitting alone in a Charlotte apartment that was entirely mine, paid for by work I had done, skills I had built, choices I had made, I realized that bitterness was just another way of letting them keep the power they'd already spent 18 years taking from me. I wasn't willing to give them that too. What I had instead of bitterness was something I had to build deliberately. Call it integrity, for lack of a better word. The decision to be honest, with Ryan, with Diane, with myself, about what I had been through and what I actually needed. Not the story that made me look fine. The real one. That kind of honesty takes something out of you and then gives something back. And what it gives back is solid in a way that performed okayness never is. The thing I'm most proud of isn't the director title or the house or the retirement account, though I worked hard for all of those. It's the fact that I learned to think clearly when everything was unclear. When I was 19 and figuring out FAFSA as an independent student, when I was 28 and reading a contract that could have gone wrong 6 different ways. When my parents stood on my front steps and named a number that was genuinely significant, and I still knew exactly what the right answer was. That kind of thinking doesn't come from talent. It comes from years of having no one else to rely on and deciding that you were going to be enough. And then there's the part nobody tells you about, that getting back up over and over from things that would have stopped other people. That is not luck. That is a muscle. Diane made up the couch without being asked. I finished high school. I graduated. I moved cities. I started over more than once. Each time, something in me knew how to stand back up, and each time it was a little less effortful, a little more natural, until standing up stopped feeling like an act of will and started feeling like just what I do. When I told my parents no that morning, I wasn't performing strength. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet. I went back inside, made coffee, sat on the steps in the March sun with Ryan and toast, and thought, this is the life I built. This is what it looks like when the things you chose are the right ones. My parents made their choices. For 22 years, so did I. That's the whole story, really. Actions accumulate. They compound the same way interest does. The life you end up with is mostly the sum of what you actually did on ordinary days when no one was watching. I chose to keep going. I chose honesty. I chose people who showed up. And one quiet Saturday morning sitting in the sun, I got to see what all of that had added up to.